Hello, Internet. I can tell you I'm excited. We have somebody very special here, Rhodesian Air Force, Wing Commander, that's what he retired. 20 years in the Air Force as a combat pilot. His name is Geldenhuys, Prop Geldenhuys. And he wrote many books, and I'm going to give you the links as well, and you will not go wrong by reading those books. They're really good. And he flew many combat operations supporting South African troops, Special Forces guys, as well as with our helicopter pilots during the Rhodesian Bush War. And therefore, it's a great privilege, it's a great honor for me to get him on the show. He's now 78 years old, but he's still a tough guy, and he's still got his brain. And we had a lot of fun recording this video. I must tell you that his wife is quite ill, as well as his son-in-law. So if you can spare a prayer for them as well, we would be very grateful. Winko, welcome. Welcome to the first episode. I pray there's going to be many more. Let us start. It's over to you.
I just want to show you three books very quickly.
Yes.
This book, it says Rhodesian Air Force Operations, Prop Geldenhuys.
Yeah, I've got that book.
Yeah. Now, it's quite extensive. This is a updated copy, and you're quite free to take any photos, out of it as you wish. They are basically all my photos. The original looks like this one. It's an A4 size.
Oh, yeah, much bigger.
This is a 6x9 American size, but about 600 pages.
And that's all the operations we've done.
Yeah, it lists there about 250 odd pages of operations.
And I see there's a vampire behind you. It's a vampire, the aircraft, the model below the plot. Yeah. So you flew them as well.
Yeah, this vampire belongs to the guy that you caught sight of.
Yes.
Graham Jelly. He's my daughter's husband. He's a guy that's got lung cancer. His father was my boss. Even before they were married, and even before I was married, he was my boss. We used to play rugby together. And many years later, I then married my wife. We had kids. My daughter trained as a nurse, and she married Graham, the son. And at the time, they didn't know each other. Graham just said, "Oh, my dad's in the Air Force." And Renine, my daughter, said, "Yeah, so's my dad in the Air Force." And so they had a courtship that got off on the right foot. But I didn't fly these FB9s or FB5s. This is a fighter bomber Mark 9. The South Africans had FB5s. But on Operation Hottentot, once the South Africans scrapped all their vampires, Operation Hottentot was Hottentot, you know?
Yeah, that's a word.
Ons noem maar Hottentot. Dan vlieg ons af with Air Rhodesia to Jan Smuts, jump in a SAF car that takes us to Waterkloof. Two Rhodesian vampires would fly down. We would jump into the South African vampires. We would start up in a hangar, taxi out, meet up with a Rhodesian aircraft. So they would shoot two blips come and land at Waterkloof, and they'll see two blips leave, but there was 4 aircraft.
Yeah. And that's how you smuggled them out.
Yeah, and I did quite a few of those trips. Anyway, this is a story about this FP9. Bull Jelly was my boss. He did his conversion at Livingston in northern Rhodesia, which became Zambia. And yeah, this was the aircraft he went solo in. Now, the guy kicked the bucket, and it's now ended up in my rubbish.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's the story of this particular group. Let's move it back. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let me just start off by saying I'm a blickwer. Have you come across a blickwer at all?
No, I think you're the first one.
Okay, so I'm a blickwer, which means that I'm a Freistarter.
Oh.
All the Free Stater guys are known as blickwer. My brother, my elder brother, who died in July this year. He's a Joey guy. He was born in Joburg. As a war baby, my mother was with her parents when she gave birth to my brother. I was born in the same room. My father was born on a farm, Ruspan in Botawil. So I'm a blickwer. Then he went and fought the Italians in East Africa, came back, moved to Oudtshoorn, and that's where my younger daughter, my younger sister was born. So she's a Valpens. I think they call it a Valpens. A Cape person. And yeah, as mentioned, my father was a pilot. After the war, when he was demobbed, he moved up to the Copper Belt. He passed through there on his way to East Africa. And that's where I went to school. Did my junior schooling in Northern Rhodesia on the Copper Belt. After 20 years, he used his fortune that he collected to go farming. So he bought a lorry, a truck, put all the furniture on top of this lorry, and we moved down to Fort Victoria in Southern Rhodesia, and he went farming. But he went bankrupt in the first year because he planted his mealies without any fertilizer. In Fort Victoria, he sent me to Gwello School. So that's where I finished my junior schooling in Gwello at Thornhill, which was an Air Force base. Anyway, that's a long story short. I don't want to bore you with too much detail there. But when I got married to my wife, I met her at school. And after schooling, my father and I tried to join the SAF. My father was accepted, and for me they said, oh, you must go back to school and do another year. But I wasn't a clever guy, but I applied to the Rhodesian Air Force and I was accepted in Rhodesia. So I didn't go back to school, but I joined the Rhodesian Air Force. We were on 16 pilot training course. We were 12 cadets. And as I said, I think there's only 3 of us left over of that original 12. So from there, I just must mention, when my father was in the copper belt, and I was about 5 years old, he took me up on a Piper aircraft at the local aerodrome. So at 5 years old, I had my first air experience, and that sold me off to join as a pilot. So my father's my hero. When I got married in uniform. My father came up from the SAF in uniform. And rather a proud moment for me. My boss man at the time was Kaz Edwards, as the OC 4 Squadron. But I got married in 1966. UDI was declared in 65. So there was fuel rationing and all sorts of stuff. It was quite a hassle. He had to leave Beitbridge with a full tank of petrol, drive up to Fort Victoria where we got married, and still get back to Beitbridge with a full tank. If not, you had to put petrol in a couple of tins of paint tins to put in petrol to get back to Beitbridge. I had to use my coupons to give to the number 4 Squadron, who formed my Guard of Honor, to get them to travel from Gwello through to Fort Vic, which was about 120 miles. So, I had to collect petrol coupons for them to attend my wedding. My wife came from a very poor family. They were farmers, and so we didn't have a big reception at all. I sent the Air Force guys to one hotel, and there was, I think, 2 hotels in Fort Vic, and we just gathered to change our clothes and bugger off to for our honeymoon. And we went to Mozambique for our honeymoon down to Paradise Island, Santa Carolina, I think it's called. And had a good honeymoon trip down there. And then, so my 2 children were born in Gwello, where I joined the Air Force. I just want to mention that at my Guard of Honor, the OC of the squadron leader, Kaz Edwards, he's now also kicked a bucket. He died a few years ago. He motored with the other guys in uniform and came to the Dutch Reformed Church. We got married in Afrikaans church. My father-in-law was very Afrikaans. He refused to speak English. When he met Englishmen, they would speak to English and he would reply in Afrikaans. If they didn't get the message, tough tacky. It wasn't his problem. Anyway, I know you're interested in South African Special Forces. Let me just say up front, I'm not a special operator. I'm just a normal Air Force pilot, but I had a lot to do with the South Africans. My father was in a SAF operation Hottentot, we called it. was flying South African vampires into Rhodesia after UDI. It was like a sanctions busting exercise, a very exciting trip there. I would use the air attache's motor car and go to the Innie in Pretoria and buy tropical fish. I was a big collector of fish tanks, and then I would drive into Voortrekker Hoogte, where my father was a storeman in 10 Air Depot, and with flag flying on the front of this VIP motor car, an outfit jumped myself, and the guys were saying, "Hey, who's this hobnob? You know, who you hobnobbing with? All these guys with these fancy, Mercedes motor cars." But I just borrowed the air attache's motor car to go down to the Innie to buy some tropical fish. Get back to Vaderkloof, and on our way back, flying these South African vampires with with pressurization didn't work. These bloody fish were in packets, and this packet would just expand like anything. But we had to keep close formation. It's only once you got to the border where we could relax that I had to puncture this bag before it burst and spread tropical fish all over the place. Then having punctured it, now I've got a problem because I've got to stop it from leaking all over the aircraft. Luckily, there was some sticky tape in the stuff, and I managed to close a hole. But the bag was quite deflated when I descended into well, we didn't land at Thornhill. Thornhill will tell Salisbury to say these aircraft coming up from South Africa, they're continuing onto Serum, and which is Salisbury. We would land at Salisbury, taxi into a hangar. The spray guys would spray all these aircraft, all the silver stuff would disappear. The next morning, they would wheel a camouflage vampire, which we would then fly back to Thornhill. Then I just want to mention that some very interesting sorties with the South Africans. The South Africans came in with Op Nickel. Now, Op Nickel was in August 1967. I got married in 1966, the year before. So I was awarded the Nickel Cross, which became the Nickel Cross became my autobiography. Which is this book called Nickel Cross.
Is it still available, sir?
Yes, it's all of these books. I've got about 50 odd books with Amazon. Now this is quite a heavy book. But my original Nickel Cross. This is the cross that was presented to me on Operation Nickel, and it was presented by the Rhodesian African Rifles, RAR. So it's called the prop, the Nickel Cross Prop Star. And prop 100 hours. I flew 100 hours on Telstar duties. So this is the only decoration I could brag of, that I got. but it was unique. It was made out of a condensed milk blicky. The engineers had it suitably engraved with all the writing. They fashioned some piece of ribbon on it, and there was quite a big presentation to me in the field. It was about a 6-week operation. They pinned it on my chest. Yeah. So these two books was called Nickel Cross, but I had to split them up. One guy recommended I should keep the military history, which is about 600 pages. And this one is about 400 pages. So together they made 1,000, 1,000 pages. This one is sold very well. It's still selling quite well now. The personal side hasn't sold too well, but I've now marketed them as a series in Amazon.
Well, I've heard that book of yours, the Ops one, is actually the book you want to read, because if you want to know anything about any operation during the Rhodesian Bush War, that is the book to go to.
Amen. That is correct.
We will put all the links in here anyway.
Yeah. This was Rhodesian operations in the 60s. Now, I found that some of those books, it's too heavy. And when I was in Air Force headquarters, I had a job as, I was posted as Strike 1. And I call it Strike 1, not out, baseball.
Yes.
And I shared an office with Peter Petterboyer. Now, he's the guy that taught me to fly. And Peter Petterboyer has now also kicked the bucket. He's dead. But Peter Boyer was TAC 1. He was in charge of the operations room and all the piston engine aircraft. I was Strike 1, sharing an office with him, in charge of all the jet squadrons in the Air Force. 1 squadron of the Hunters, 2 squadron of Vampires, 5 squadron Canberras. Well, those were the three jet squadrons we had. So I was in charge of the jet squadrons. But the ops room had this beautiful map of the country, and they deployed all the aircraft that were deployed over the country. They would be marked on this map, and Ops 1 was the guy that had to give a sit rep every day to the commander. So during the night, all the reports would come in. He would compile the sit rep, and then the commander would get an updated brief as to what happened in the last 24 hours. As Strike 1, you had to sleep over like once a week or so, spend the night in Air Force headquarters, and you would help with the ops staff, collecting all the, all the like the sit reps, and from the sit reps they would combine a brief for the commander. Anyway, that's what I found. I found writing your story in small lots was a lot more worthwhile than 600 pages of stuff. What I wanted to mention is Operation Polo, which was in August 1976. Up Onyx, July, August 73. Up Yep. Up Yep was a SAF supplying Rhodesians with Alouette 2s, which trained the helicopter guys. Operation Sand. Op Sand was a smash operation where Rhodesian guys flew the Impala and the Mirage from Petersburg and from Waterkloof. The Impalas were flown from Durban and Langebaan down in the Cape. One whole course was trained on Impalas down at Langebaan. I've got quite an interesting story of Langebaan in Canberra. We used to fly down to Cape Town as a jolly over a weekend. You'd fly down on a Friday, and then on a Monday you'd fly back to Rhodesia, and you'd have the whole weekend to go and buy Cape wine and prawns and stuff. But one particular trip, OC Flying would meet us at Langebaan, and it was a real miserable day. We had to go and drop some bombs at Hopefield Range, and the poor old tech, we left him in the rain to fill up the aircraft with fuel, but he filled up number 3 tank first, which should be the last tank he should fill up. So what happened was this bloody Canberra sat on his tail, and then de-siphon the fuel to get the thing to get back into flying position. That was quite an hilarious thing. I was sitting in OC Flying's office having some like a hot coffee, and then I see my Canberra sitting on his tail. But on Canberra's, from Langebaan, we'd fly down to Cape Town along the coast, and the odd sortie, you'd fly all the way up. Often we would land at Port Elizabeth, and you'd meet up with all the naval guys, mainly in Port Elizabeth. And South African Navy guys were quite interesting. These rovers were in Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, Langebaan, Bloemfontein, Petersburg, Pretoria, LM, Beira, Nampula, and Luanda. With the Portuguese were still in control of Angola, so we used to do our nav X's into Luanda. That was quite interesting. There was an operation there that we had to go and bomb some group camps, and that's another story. A couple of people I want to mention very, very briefly. Firstly, Hugh Slatter. He was on our course. Hugh Slatter wrote the foreword to my Operation Nickel book. So him and I have been in comms in quite a long time. He became the Air Vice Marshal. Then he was held responsible by Mugabe for blowing up the aircraft, put in jail, beaten about, tortured. They employed a lawyer from England. The name escapes me at the moment. But this guy really tore the Rhodesian or Zimbabwean lawyers to pieces in the court case. They were acquitted, put on an aircraft, flown out of the country to London. Full pile stayed behind in London. Hugh Slatter carried on to America. There was a US senator that helped him as well. They had to sell their houses to pay for legal fees, and then Norman Walsh, the day they were released, he resigned from the Air Force, and they brought in a Pakistani Air Force commander. Then Peran Shiri, a Guk leader, became the Air Force commander. He did a crash course. I mean, a crash course just to get wings put on his uniform, because he had to be a pilot to become the commander of the Air Force. Yeah. Then I just want to mention my trip on 5 Squadron. We were flying the 2 types of Canberras. The B2 was the bomber, and we had a T4, which was a dual-seater Canberra. We converted one B2 to a T4 when the first T4 got to Timex. I served with Squadron Leader Tol Yannicka, who was our squadron commander on Canberras. Prior to me getting onto Canberras, I was posted to 1 Squadron, which was our hunters. So I'd flown all the strike aircraft in the Rhodesian Air Force. I was a flight commander on one Squadron. That was in 1970, when my son was born. Pei went through the sound barrier when he was born. You had to put the hunter into a steep dive to go through the barrier. But on our trips to South Africa, we'd be intercepted by the Mirages, and in those days, 1970s, they had Sabres. And the Sabres used to clean us up because they were very maneuverable. They could outturn a hunter. But the Mirages, we were no match for the Mirages. We enticed them into a dogfight. So there was a lot of mixing between ourselves and the South Africans. But the South Africans had some fairly hotshot pilots. They really cleaned us up when they put their aces against us. Yeah. And then on Canberras, our squadron commander was Randy Durant. But before I get on to Randy Durant, let me just mention a good mate of mine. I met him at it was our Louis Stopforth. Now, our Louis Stopforth was in the Armored Car Regiment. He's got quite an interesting story to tell. But he's got a medical problem, the poor bugger. And he will, oh, sorry, I must watch my language. Louis Stopforth was a gunner on armored cars, mainly the Ferrets, but he also was a gunner on the Elan 90s that fired a more of a big round. So Louis has got an interesting story, but he's got to sort out his medical problem first. He's got a bit of a back problem, but he's a real straight shooting, talking guy, first class. And I'm still waiting for him to write his full story, because this is the name I use for as publishing the all of the war stories. How are we doing for time?
There's no time limit, sir. I'm sitting here with a smile as big as the Free State. So flock this. I'm really enjoying this. Thank you so much. This is just fantastic. I must tell you, just carry on. Just tell us we're listening.
Yeah, I just want to touch a bit on Operation Onyx. The Canberra was a photo reconnaissance aircraft, but we also used it in a bombing role. And we used to take photographs, fly from Salisbury, quite far into the country, up north, up to Tanzania. Now, some of these sorties were about 4 hours, 5 hours, and your briefing was you had to take all your IDs and all markings off your overalls. If you were shot down, they will deny that you were on a tour, and they would claim that you got lost, and that was it. But they used to give you about 100 rands. Well, it was, I think, 100 rands kwachas. Just to tie yourself over, you had to bury your parachute and try and make your way back to the country. But flying out of Nampula, which was quite good, you were right on the Tanzanian border. But there we did mapping really. On Operation Onyx, the South Africans developed a film. The Rhodesians flew the aircraft, and Portugal paid the bills. When we went up to Nampula, we would live in Portuguese military bases, hotels. They were very good with their cashew nuts and their vinos. Their wines were first class. And we would load up these bloody canvas as much as we could in the Bombay and bring all the wines and stuff. It's like when we went down to Cape Town, we would get a lot of, especially Langebaan was crayfish. I must just mention one little story which is quite interesting. On one of my trips to Langebaan, the guys took us down and brought this lovely crayfish. It was longer than my arm, man. But we flew low level from Cape Town from Langebaan to Cape Town, which was only about 30 minutes. But once you landed there, you took this crayfish to the hotel and asked them to put it in the freezer for you. And then before takeoff, you would wrap it up in a lot of newspaper. And because we would come back at altitude, so it'll be sub-zero temperatures at 40,000 odd feet. But when I got home with this smelly crayfish, my wife said, no, bugger that, and threw it in the dustbin. And that was the end of my lekker long, big crayfish.
I need to know, what did your father fly when he was in the Second World War with the South African Air Force?
He flew Harvards in Rhodesia, and that's what, and it was with the Royal Air Force instructors to do a conversion on Harvards. I was led to believe that he may have flown Hurricanes, but there's no record. But he's flown about 20 different types. But his main war experience was in Gloucester Gladiators. Yeah.
So he would have been a fighter pilot.
Yes, he was a fighter pilot. Came back. He was a number 3 squadron. Came back and joined 9 Squadron down in Durban. Then was posted to Oxfords and Ansons. Then did coastal patrols. They were a lot of Japanese submarines, sunk quite a few ships off the South African waters. So he was doing mainly coastal patrols all the way from Cape Town. That's when he was based at Oudtshoorn for quite a while. Flew out of Durban as well.
Can you tell us the different types of aircraft which you flew?
Okay. The aircraft I didn't fly was helicopters and transport aircraft. But I started off in the Hunting Percival Provost, which was side-by-side seating with fixed undercarriage, very same performance as the South African Harvards, which was tandem seating and retractable undercarriage. So that's what our training was on Hunting Percival Provost, and I was there for about 7 years. Probably had about the second or third most flying hours on Provost in my time. From that, I went on to Vampires. Vampires was a super weapons platform, very accurate. I was quite an acer at rocket firing on the Vamps. Did airstrikes on Operation Cauldron with Bull Jelly. Bull Jelly was that's my son-in-law's father. Him and I did the Operation Cauldron airstrikes. We did Operation Mansion airstrikes, Vampires. I'd like to mention Richard Wood. He's a professor of history. Him and I, he was the first guy that bought my Nickel Cross book because he liked the initial war years and wanted best evidence, I think they called it, from the horse's mouth rather than hearsay stuff. He was professor of history in Durban University. Want to mention Tol Janaka. Tol Janaka was my squadron commander on the Canberras. He made me a flight commander on the squadron. And him and I have mixed and stayed together for quite a few postings. For example, he was OC2 squadron at one time. He was my boss man on Canberras. After Canberras, when I became a squadron leader, I did a lot of field duties. I would be down at Fort Airfield 7 Buffalo Range, and he would be the OC as a group captain at Fort Victoria with 2 RAR at Airdet Repulse. He was the main manner at Airdet Repulse. I was down there. When he was a station commander at Thornhill, I was his OC admin wing. And if I can just digress very slightly here, him and Hugh Slatter, who was OC flying wing, whenever there was an external operation on, they would go and jammy rides on Hunters and Vampires. So on Ob Dice, very big operation, which Norman Walsh, the commander, and Robbie Robinson, the OC SAS, had put together. They went and attacked a group of complex in Mozambique, and Tol Janaka and Hugh Slatter arranged as the retread pilots on Vampires to go and attack the students' camp which was to the northeast of the main camp at Obdice. And we lost one vampire there, in a vampire FB9, a guy called Phil Haig, who was killed. He got a small arms fire in one of the jet combustion chambers. Couldn't maintain height. Eventually force landed the FB9. Now, your normal drill was, if you've got to have flying speed, you've got to put this thing in a dive, turn the vampire upside down, and fall out of the aircraft. You'd be lucky if the tail boom didn't connect you. But he elected to stay with the aircraft. He did a perfect forced landing in the field, but there was a ditch against it. Now, the FB9, he was sitting right in the nose, and the vampire was a balsa wood aircraft. And this poor aircraft hit this ditch, and you had this massive goblin engine behind you that just came through and squashed the poor fellow. So he was killed. As the most senior guy at the base, I was acting as a base commander, as a squadron leader. Now, normally the base would be run by a group captain, a full colonel or commandant, and the OC flying we would stand in for the group captain, but both of them were on the operation. So I was the next senior guy, and I had to be standing for the boss man when he was on his jollies. So when Phil Haig, this guy, was killed in the vampire, I got a phone call from SO Perth, Air Force headquarters, to tell me, get in your car and go and tell Dot, his wife, that her husband has been killed. Now, we've been taught, if you have got to pass on some bad news and the guy isn't killed, your opening words is, hey, I've just spoken, your husband has just told me to tell you, or whatever. If he's been injured, and that's assuming he can speak, but if he's killed, there's really no short way of breaking the news. You got to say, hey man, look, I've got any bad news. Your husband has been killed in action in war. So I got the message from SO Perth even before Tol Jannek had phoned his wife as a base commander. So after I told her, I popped around to his house to tell his wife, look, maybe you can get some Air Force wives together. They must go and see if they can't pacify old Dot, the guy's wife. And she thought, when she saw the staff car drive into her yard, that I was coming to tell her that something had happened to her husband. And it was hello, by the way, I think you need to know that for a vampire guy has been killed. So she nearly fainted when I drove up into her yard, thinking that I was coming to tell her that Tol had died. But Tol was a great boss man. I've spoken about Bill Jelly, and we did a lot of vampire airstrikes together, and I've done a book on him as well. Louis Stopworth we've spoken about. I want to mention Tony Schmidt. Tony Schmidt was 2 courses ahead of me. I think it was a number 14 course. We were number 16 course. With Bull Jelly on Griffin, we couldn't discharge any weapons because the safety distances didn't allow us, and the provost was stacking over the SAP heads to get to the target. Bull Jelly wisely decided, no, the safety distances were inadequate, and he waved us off. But Bill, Jill and I did a lot of airstrikes. We were together in Operation Cauldron. As I mentioned, that was quite a successful operation. Operation Mansion was another airstrike in vampires that we carried out. That was in 1968, later on. Yeah, then South Africans, Mostert, I think his name was. First time I met him was the strange squadron leader that I saw in the bush flying helicopters. Got to know him subsequent. I think he became a lieutenant general or major general or something in the SAF, and was flying helicopters quite late in life. Quite a character. Randy Durant, our Canberra squadron commander after Tolyanica, developed radioactive marker services called RAMs. And this is where the navigator could aim his bomb sight up to 2 kilometers short of a target, and the bombs would overfly and hit a target up to 2 miles further on. So Randy Durant perfected our night operation onto Turk camps, but you needed ground troops to go and place a flare. There were normally 2 flares. One flare was a marker flare, and then your aiming flare was just beyond that. So you would get the 2 flares, which you could operate from the cockpit. You press a button and the flare would go off. But you needed some guy on the ground to go and suitably place the flares very accurately. Yeah, and any other questions?
Two last questions. I know it's late at night in New Zealand, and we will have many episodes, for which I thank you, of course. I mean, this is fascinating. I'm really enjoying this. Did the Air Force have any strange pets? Because I know that a guy like Adolf Galland, the fighter ace of Germany, had a pet lion or something with him. Did the Air Force pilots have some strange pets which were kept?
No, I think helicopter pilots, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He had a dog called Doris, and he used to fly everywhere with this dog of his. Trying to think of the guy's name, and it's just escaped me. He was a destroyer of helicopters, by the way. He was the sort of guy, when the fertilizer hits a fan, you want him on your side. But in peacetime, he was more of a hassle. He was always in trouble. He was one of those naughty buggers. Mike Borlace was the guy's name. Now, what happened to him, Kaz Edwards, I've mentioned Kaz Edwards was a squadron commander of mine, but he was Director General Operations when I was in Air Force headquarters. And Mike Borlace had come back from leave, stashed his war booty in his locker, then buggered off on his R&R. Some bugger had broken into his digs or his flat and recovered this AK-47, whatever he had there. And it was forbidden to take stuff from your war relics or stuff. Anyway, so he was marched into the DG office when he came back from his R&R, and he was given the option, look, we're going to have to court-martial you. you've broken a cardinal rule, and this guy was upset that they'd broken into his locker to get the stuff. Anyway, he stormed out the office, walked across the road, met up with Ronry Daly. Ronry Daly said, "Oh, you're hutful with the Air Force. Come and join us." So he joined them as a Selous scout. But he was caught in Zambia, and put in jail. And one of his hot extractions, and our helicopter pilots, you mentioned
Neil Ellis.
Ian Ellis, yeah, that type of category. But on a hot extraction, when these choppers had to pull these guys out in very trying conditions, and very often they had a harness that they had to put under their clobber, and the helicopter guys would drop a rope with a sling with a hook, and you would just hook it onto your hot extraction harness. They would be normally on the run. They would have jettisoned all the packs and their stuff. They'd be running for their life, really. And very often the helicopter guys would really end up in the thick of things, and often drag the guy through a lot of trees before they got him clear obstacles. Anyway, a funny story about Mike Borlace. They hot extracted him out of Zambia, and he was all dirtied up. He was black as beautiful camo cream. He mentioned to the pilot, "Hey, do you know who we've got here in the back seat? Mike, a helicopter pilot." And so that was. I'm waiting for his story to be told.
Yeah, we would love to get hold of him as well, if it's possible, or his story perhaps. But I have one, the very last question, is, should there be a young man or a young woman listening to you now, and they want to become a pilot or a combat pilot as you used to be? What advice do you have for them?
Go for it. Yeah. If you get that opportunity, jump in, boots and all. It's a good life. Your mates are lifelong friends. I've had 2 jobs in my life. When I left school, I joined the Air Force for 20 years. And we have these associations, and we meet there once a year. We've got a guy in Tauranga who's done a very beautiful museum there. So when I die, all my logbooks and stuff must go to him, because I know they'll look after it. And the other job was with Masonite. Now, Masonite is also no longer there. It's escort-based. I was a personnel superintendent with Masonite. And the boss man there was looked after me very well. That's where Rina had a stroke. Also, excellent career for was a board manufacturer. Sent me to America. That's another story. And his wife also contracted cancer. I don't know if she survived, but I'm sure he must have kicked a bucket by now. He would have been quite a few years older than what I am. I'm 78. But I've had a good life. And So if a guy gets an opportunity to become a combat pilot, you must go for it.
Well, I thank you for that. I think what I'll do now is I'll just end it, and then next week we will carry on, if you don't mind. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions as well from the viewers. As always, I say to you listening here, you are not unimportant. It doesn't matter if you were not a combat pilot or a recce or anything. Everybody contributed. I have another SA Air Force person which I interviewed in New Zealand. He was an electronic warfare specialist, flew that spook aircraft of his. And he tells me that it took about 70 people just to get that aircraft to fly. So there's no such thing as unimportant. If you serve, come and talk to us. It's an open invitation. Let us get your memories down here so that they don't get lost. Winko, thank you so much. I wish you the very best until we meet again. And God bless.
Amen. Thank you, Koos. And I must just thank you for this opportunity. Send my regards to Rebecca. And good luck with your video series. All of the best. And I've listened to quite a few of them. And they're really top notch. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir. I'm really grateful for you. Next week, same time, same story. I think there's so much you can still tell us, and you can talk until you're tired. I mean, then you just say to me, because I'm going to bed now, and then we leave it.